Order. We begin with the Select Committee statement. Mr Alistair Carmichael will speak on the publication of the 5th report of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee, UK-EU Agritrade, making an SPS agreement work, House of Commons HC 1661, for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions may be taken. At the conclusion of his statement, I will call members to put questions on the subject of the statement and call Mr Alistair Carmichael to respond to these in turn. Questions should be brief and members may only ask one question each. I call Mr Alistair Carmichael, Chair of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Ms Jardine, and it is as ever an inestimable pleasure to serve under your stewardship in Westminster Hall. And may I place on record my appreciation of the Backbench Business Committee for granting time for me to make a statement to mark the publication of the 5th report of our committee of this Parliament in relation to UK-EU Agritrade making an SPS agreement work. This report is the third major output of our long-term inquiry into animal and plant health. As part of our inquiry, we have spent time in discussion with domestic stakeholders in farming and food production and with officials and parliamentarians in Brussels. It is clear from our time in Brussels that the Prime Minister's reset in May 2025 has created a political environment where the early conclusion of an SPS agreement with the European Union is a realistic objective. Progressing towards an agreement at pace brings with it both opportunities and threats. The main threat that we identify is that the process of dynamic alignment could result in us aligning with regulations that will weaken the position of our food producers, as it might deny them access to products on which they currently rely. This threat is particularly acute in relation to plant protection products used by our arable farmers. This is a complex area where the needs of our farmers must be understood and protected. I do not doubt that in the negotiation of the agreement the Government will seek to do this. I am less convinced, however, that in practice they will have the depth of knowledge necessary to avoid the law of unintended consequences coming into play. That depth of knowledge exists and is readily accessible for the Government from British farmers and other businesses involved in the manufacture of plant protection products. So securing their fullest engagement is the best way to ensure that any agreement is workable and will not leave our food producers at a disadvantage. On the subject of engagement, I would observe in passing that when in Brussels, the committee benefited from high-level and good-quality engagement from officials in the Commission and members of the European Parliament, as well as other relevant organisations. By contrast, our engagement with our own government has been less straightforward. The Minister for Constitution and EU Relations declined our invitation to appear before the committee and has offered instead a private briefing for me as chair. I am afraid that this offer, while appreciated, rather misses the point of how select committees work and especially how the EFRA committee works. I am not blind to the sensitivities of a live negotiation, but we are a select committee of the House of Commons charged with the scrutiny of government. And for us not to scrutinise fully the Government's conduct of these negotiations would be a dereliction of our duty, which I am not prepared to countenance. So let me place on record today that the committee's work on this most important of areas for our food producers is continuing and that we look to the Government for better engagement than we have had. If the sensitivities of the negotiation mean that ministers are unwilling to appear in public, and that is not an unreasonable position, then other means must be found for the committee to fulfil its duties. At the very least, I would hope to see a briefing of the whole committee in private. A central issue in these negotiations is dynamic regulatory alignment. Under such a model, the UK may be required to adjust domestic laws when the EU changes its own, particularly in areas such as animal welfare, pesticide regulation and precision breeding. We heard deep concerns from the agri-food sector that unqualified dynamic alignment risks placing additional burdens on UK farmers or undercutting them with cheaper imports produced under weaker standards. Our report therefore recommends that the Government seek a Swiss-style carve-out for animal welfare rules, ensuring that the UK is not compelled to follow every regulatory change that could be to the detriment of higher UK standards in this area. Similarly, the Government should seek an exemption from dynamic alignment for precision bred products. Some of the UK is ahead of the EU in this area, having already enabled farmers to grow and market precision bred seeds, plants, food and animal feed in England. Without an exemption, we risk losing the benefits of moving first. Mandatory alignment with future EU rules could undermine our progress on innovation and weaken the UK's leadership in this sector. On pesticides and maximum residue levels, we heard evidence that EU rules developed post-Brexit may not reflect UK agronomic conditions. Imposing them without consideration of our climate, crops and production systems risks unnecessary burdens for growers, which at best may be impractical, but at worst may be impossible. We therefore recommend that any SPS agreement must guarantee that UK scientific evidence is fully considered in all risk-based decisions affecting our agriculture. Our inquiry also highlighted that SPS alignment will not succeed without public understanding and trust. Dynamic alignment involves choices. We need a national conversation between government and the public to set out the realities, opportunities and constraints of a potential SPS deal. I turn then to Northern Ireland and the provision of veterinary medicines. While veterinary medicines themselves are not formally within the scope of this SPS agreement, they remain an unresolved and urgent issue under the Windsor framework. The continued uncertainty about the availability of certain medicines in Northern Ireland poses real risks to animal health, farm businesses and trade. We therefore recommend that the Government pursue a veterinary medicines agreement with the EU concurrently with SPS discussions and sets out clear timelines and priorities for doing so. For Parliament, these negotiations raise fundamental questions. If future EU regulatory changes may affect UK law, then Parliament must have a clear and meaningful role in scrutinising both the negotiations and any subsequent rule changes. We have recommended that the Government publish detailed plans for parliamentary scrutiny, including how EU legislation would be assessed before being considered for assimilation into UK law. A workable SPS agreement will require careful, phased implementation. Border authorities, the Food Standards Agency, local authorities, port health teams, laboratories and industry all made clear to us that significant regulatory change requires long lead-in times. Staff training, new systems and revised working practices cannot be introduced overnight. We therefore recommend a minimum 24-month implementation period for any major regulatory changes arising from an SPS agreement. In this report, we've set out the opportunities of an SPS agreement, and they are significant. A well-designed agreement could ease trade, reduce costs, and strengthen ties with our largest trading partner. But the risks are also significant. Poorly managed alignment could burden farmers, erode trust, undermine innovation, and weaken the UK's ability to act on its own scientific evidence. Our recommendations are practical and proportionate. They are designed to ensure that any SPS agreement supports UK agriculture, strengthens biosecurity, and commands public and parliamentary confidence. It is crucial that the Government enters these negotiations with absolute clarity, purpose and a determination to safeguard the interests of the UK's agri-food sector. Farmers need certainty, fairness and a government that recognises the weight of its responsibility. The stakes for our farmers, food system and national resilience are simply too high for anything less. Thank you, Ms Jardine.
Thank you. I see I don't need to remind members that they should bob if they wish to ask a question. Terry Jeremy, please.
Thank you, Ms Jardine. I very much welcome this report, and in particular I wanted to comment on the recommendation around precision breeding and support the recommendation around an exemption from dynamic alignment for precision breeding. In my part of the country, we are very proud to host the Norwich Research Park, the Quadrum Institute and the John Innes Centre, very much at the forefront of scientific scientific innovation. And this is, I think, a British success story, but also really important to us locally in terms of jobs and the local economy. So can I ask the Chair of the Select Committee if he believes the government recognises the value of this scientific advancement?
Formally to the committee and thank him for his role and his contribution to its proceedings. I also say in record that we did benefit from time spent in the John S. Centre, and I think it's not a subject of any controversy to say that the committee was very impressed by the work that we saw there, the professionalism of all those who work there and their commitment to improving our commercial advantage in relation to precision breeding and gene editing. On that point, I think it's fair to say that the position in England is one which farmers in other parts of the United Kingdom look to with a degree of envy, and it would be a great shame if we lost the advantage that England has had from being an early adopter here. My impression personally was, speaking to people in the Commission, that they are keen actually to see the steps that the UK has taken as an encouragement for their member states to come towards our position, and that dynamic alignment is not necessarily going to be a one-way process. So I think the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right in highlighting that, and I think that any SPS agreement that didn't actually respect and enhance the advantage that we have there would be one which really missed a most important trick for our farmers.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. I welcome this report and reiterate thanks to the Backbench Business Committee for giving us this opportunity this afternoon. Now, my right honourable friend will be aware of the report the Anderson Centre has done on behalf of CropLife, which indicates that we could, with alignment, wipe £810 million of farm profits in year one alone, see wheat production down 16%, apples down 7%, potatoes down 6%, possibly costing 9,000 agricultural jobs. So with that in mind, would you agree with me that it is absolutely paramount that the Minister responsible for EU negotiations comes before our committee, either in public or in private, at the earliest opportunity?
Mr Alistair Carmichael.
The Honourable Gentleman knows my views on this. In fact, I've touched on them already, and I think it absolutely is essential. And it's to the benefit of everybody that those who are responsible for the negotiations should have the fullest understanding, both of the views in Parliament and out there in the production sector. CropLife UK is a good example of that, and also of the farmers who are on the day-to-day responsibility for this. A good SPS agreement that gets things right shouldn't have too many unintended consequences. A lengthy implementation period, £810 million is the consequence, apparently, of a cliff edge implementation. A lengthy implementation period will allow us the opportunity to smooth out any wrinkles that we might inadvertently have agreed to. We know, dare I say it, from the agreement of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, how rushing things can sometimes make things more difficult in the longer term.
The SPS is a really positive development and an opportunity for us. If the suggested timescales do come off, it will be impressively quick, but of course with such fast timescales come those risks, and that's what the report has spoken about. Would the Chair agree how important it is that our higher welfare standards are maintained, but also that our UK farmers are not undercut by imports with lower welfare standards?
The Honourable Lady is absolutely right, and she was with us when we heard from the Swiss representatives in Brussels, and they were successful over a rather longer negotiation period. But I give credit to the Prime Minister for having created the political environment where a negotiated agreement in the course of this year is not now just seen as possible, it's expected. And I can understand all the reasons why the Prime Minister then would want to see the earliest possible implementation, because there are imperatives coming from the political electoral cycle, shall we say. But at the end of the day, What is more important is that our farmers get what is necessary to allow them to take advantage of it, because if they can't actually then sell the products into market, then we've missed the whole point of having an SPS agreement. It's an SPS agreement simply for the sake of it then. And yes, she's absolutely right that on this, as in just every other trade deal that we have, leaving ourselves open to the import of food that has been produced to lower standards than what we expect of our own farmers would be absolute madness.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, and I'm grateful to the chair of the DEFRA Select Committee for laying out the top lines from this excellent report, and commend the committee for its work on the inquiry into animal and plant health. He talks about the Minister for the Cabinet Office not appearing before the committee. The Minister did appear before the Foreign Affairs Committee in September as part of our inquiry into the UK-EU reset, but of course that is not the place for detail on SPS arrangements. So my question, any alignment with the EU on SPS needs to be phased in. Could the Right Honourable Member expand on why this shift needs to be a transition rather than an immediate removal of friction, given that the NFU has said it's critical that we avoid a cliff edge?
Sir Alistair Carmichael.
It is, on any objective analysis, it is very important that we get this right, and you get it right by doing it slowly and carefully. The honourable gentleman from East Yorkshire, the full name of the constituency, I can't now remember, the lobster capital of Europe, it referenced the report from CropLife UK, which seeks to quantify the financial cost of a cliff edge implementation, and they put it as high as £810 million. Now, they're not saying don't do this, obviously. They are simply saying that if you do this with no proper implementation period, then there is going to be financial cost attached to this. At a time when the government's central mission is one around economic growth, and that economic growth has got to be available to every community in the country, rural as well as urban, then to take that sort of risk for a political imperative of timing seems to me an unacceptable way of managing an important agreement like this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for his clear message in relation to the veterinary medicines for Northern Ireland, and his and the committee's encouragement to the Minister to ensure that the agreement is in place as soon as possible. And whilst we very much welcome the alignment between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, and understand the report highlights that the SPS agreement could significantly reduce regulatory friction between Great Britain and Northern Ireland by aligning standards, potentially removing physical checks and not for EU labelling requirements. However, did the Right Honourable Member and Chair and his committee consider that government cannot exercise re-entrance to Europe by the back door? And how can government ensure that a tailor-made UK deal for all is the approach by this government? Thanks so much.
Sir Carmichael.
In terms of an ultimate destination, if it were to be re-entry either by the back door or the front door, I suspect the honourable gentleman and I might struggle to find a common position of agreement. But let's be quite clear about what we are dealing with here. An SPS agreement is very tightly drawn. It is about frictionless access for our food producers to get their products to the market in our single biggest market. That's why there is a real opportunity here. In relation to the veterinary medicines agreement, for example, that to my mind goes beyond even trade. That's a matter of animal welfare, and that we should be allowing questions of constitution to get in the way of providing the animal welfare products that we need in any part of the United Kingdom would appear to my mind to be unforgivable.
Order, order. If I could now ask everyone to get into their seats quickly so that we could get on with the next debate, please. We have 30 seconds. Thank you.